On the evening of November 26, 2019, Lori Vallow Daybell told a Rexburg police lieutenant that her 7-year-old son was safe. She said he was with a friend in Arizona. She gave the friend's name, Melanie Gibb. Police called Melanie Gibb. At first, she repeated Lori's story. Then she called back and said J.J. had never been with her. 8 months later, June 9, 2020, FBI forensic dogs walked Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho. They led investigators to a pet cemetery in his yard. Police dug. They found J.J. Vallow. He had been wrapped in plastic. He had been bound with tape. A hair from that tape would later match a sample from Lori Vallow Daybell's head. In a separate burial site on the same property, investigators found J.J.'s 16-year-old sister, Tylee Ryan. What had been done to her would become clear in court. Nearly 3 years later, a jury in Boise, Idaho convicted Lori Vallow Daybell of murdering both of her children. As of mid-May 2026, she is asking the Idaho Supreme Court for a new trial. Her reply brief was electronically filed on March 11, 2026. The state has answered. They call every one of her arguments wrong. What was she doing while she was telling police her son was safe? I am Carson Morgan. This is Unsolved. Chronicles X. Lori Vallow Daybell and her husband Chad Daybell became the center of one of the most closely watched murder cases in recent American courts after police found her children buried on his Idaho property. In June, it will be 6 years since investigators dug up Tylee and J.J. 6 years since the family that loved them learned where they were. The case is on the books, but it is not finished. Before this case became a national obsession, there were 2 kids. Joshua Jackson Vallow, J.J. He was 7 years old in 2019. He was Charles Vallow's grandnephew. Charles and Lori adopted him together. J.J. was born prematurely. He was autistic. Trial testimony described him as smart and loving, a typical 7-year-old autistic kid. He followed a strict routine. He had some trouble in social situations. He could get upset at small things. He was not yet fully potty trained at night. He attended a private school that had services for autistic kids. Tylee Ryan was 16. She was J.J.'s half-sister, Lori's daughter from her first marriage. Trial testimony described Tylee as a smart and vivacious kid who could be a moody teenager. She struggled with depression and anxiety and panic attacks. She had frequent and painful bouts of pancreatitis throughout her childhood. She got her GED so she could graduate from high school early. In October of 2018, Lori met a man at a religious conference in St. Saxaprashans, George, Utah. His name was Chad Daybell. He was from Rexburg, Idaho. He sold self-published novels about end-times preparation and near-death experiences. He told followers he could see the light and the dark in people. He claimed to be able to see beyond the veil. He told Lori, the trial record says, that they had been married in a prior life. Within months, Lori's marriage to Charles Vallow began to fall apart. By that summer, Charles came to Lori's home in Chandler, Arizona, to pick up J.J. for school. Charles got J.J. into the car. Then he came back inside because he had left his phone. Lori had it. He argued with her. He chased her around the room. Tylee came out of her bedroom with a baseball bat. A 16-year-old girl with a bat defending her mother. Charles took the bat from her. Then Lori's brother Alex Cox came out of his bedroom with a gun. He shot Charles twice. Charles Vallow died. Alex Cox told police it was self-defense. Police would later testify that some of the physical evidence did not match Alex's version. After Charles died, J.J. began receiving Social Security survivor benefits as Charles's surviving minor child. Lori checked into Charles's $1 million life insurance policy. She discovered Charles had recently changed the beneficiary to his sister. That September, Lori moved from Arizona to Rexburg. She brought Tylee and J.J. with her. On September 8, 2019, Alex and Lori took the kids to Yellowstone National Park. Lori photographed a smiling Tylee hugging J.J. with Alex to the side, near the geysers. This is the last publicly known photo of Tylee Ryan. 2 weeks later, J.J. with her was gone too. September 22, 2019. Late evening. Lori's friend Melanie Gibb was visiting from Arizona with her fiancé. They were recording a podcast. Alex Cox came into the living room. He was carrying a sleeping J.J. up the stairs. The next morning, Melanie and her fiancé left. They did not see J.J. again. J.J. did not return to school. He never returned to school. After J.J. vanished, the violence around Lori and Chad did not stop. It spread. Early October. Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, had just gotten out of her car in her driveway in Salem, Idaho. A masked person walked up to her and fired what appeared to be a paint gun at her. She asked the person what they were doing. They ran away. A few days later, in Gilbert, Arizona, a shooter fired a gun from the back of a Jeep at Brandon B.O. Droe. Brandon was the husband. Lori's niece was divorcing. The shooter missed him. Brandon stepped on the gas and got away. October 19, 2019. Tammy Daybell died in her sleep at the age of 49. She had been married to Chad Daybell for nearly 30 years. She had 5 children. The coroner initially ruled the death natural. Chad chose not to have an autopsy completed. Tammy was buried in Utah within a few days. Chad collected her life insurance. Less than 3 weeks later, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow were married in Hawaii. In November, J.J.'s grandmother had been calling. She had not heard from her grandson in months. That grandmother's name was Kay Woodcock. Kay was Charles Vallow's sister. Kay was J.J.'s biological grandmother through Charles. Kay would not stop calling. Rexburg police went to Lori's townhome and asked about the boy. That was the welfare check that opens this episode. The story Lori gave them did not survive the phone call to Melanie Gibb. 5 days after that welfare check, Chad and Lori flew to Hawaii. They left J.J. and Tylee behind. In December, Tammy Daybell's body was exhumed. The coroner revised the cause of death to asphyxiation. That same month, Alex Cox died. He had married Zulema Pastines and moved back to Arizona to live with her. The medical examiner ruled his manner of death natural. The cause was bilateral pulmonary thromboemboli, with cardiovascular disease contributing. Alex Cox sat near the center of the state's timeline in Arizona and Idaho. Whatever he may have known about those events, he never answered those questions in court, but he left something else behind. And the state of Idaho would eventually find it. In late December, Rexburg police and the FBI publicly announced that 7-year-old J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan were missing. Lori and Chad were not in Idaho. They were in Kauai. In late January of 2020, authorities served Lori with an order requiring her to produce the children within 5 days. She did not. Police arrested her in Kauai on February 20th on 2 felony charges alleging desertion of her children. She was extradited to Idaho. The Idaho investigation had a problem. 2 missing children. A mother who would not say where they were. A brother who was dead. A husband whose first wife had been buried without an autopsy. They did not have bodies yet. They had Alex Cox's phone, and it kept putting him on Chad Daybell's land. Alex's phone placed him at Chad Daybell's Salem, Idaho property in the days surrounding Tylee's last known appearance. The same phone placed him at the same property in the days surrounding J.J.'s last known appearance. June 9, 2020, the search warrant had been signed. Investigators walked Chad Daybell's property. FBI forensic anthropology resources were on scene. So were Fremont County Sheriff's deputies. So were forensic dogs. The dogs led them to the area near the pet cemetery. They dug. They found J.J. Vallow first. He had been wrapped in plastic. He had been bound with green tape. In a separate burial site on the same property, they found Tylee Ryan. Her remains had been burned. Her body had been partially dismembered. The FBI forensic anthropologist would later testify that the burning had been set while her bones were still biomechanically fresh. While the search was ongoing, Chad Daybell attempted to drive away from the scene. He was arrested. The Woodcocks had spent 9 months asking law enforcement, asking the media, asking anyone who would listen, where their grandson was. They had appeared on national television. They had stood outside courthouses. They had filed missing persons reports across 2 states. They learned where J.J. was on June 9, 2020. That was the human truth. The forensic truth came next. A hair from the tape around J.J.'s body matched Lori. A latent fingerprint on the plastic matched Alex Cox. Tylee's DNA was found on tools recovered from Chad Daybell's property. The state did not need jurors to believe Lori Vallow Daybell killed with her own hands. It needed jurors to believe she helped build the system that marked people for death. Prosecutors said, Chad Daybell named certain people dark. Lori accepted those designations. Alex Cox carried out the violence. The belief system gave the state a motive. The forensics gave the state a case. 6 weeks before trial, the court did something that should not happen in a death penalty case, but did. The court struck the state's notice of intent to seek the death penalty. It was not a ruling about the evidence. It was a sanction. The court found the state of Idaho had repeatedly violated its discovery obligations. The state had not turned over what it was required to turn over. So the state lost the right to ask a jury to kill Lori Vallow Daybell. The trial started anyway. The trial of Lori Vallow Daybell began in the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho, in the spring of 2023. The presiding judge was the Honorable Stephen W. Boyce. The trial lasted about 6 weeks. On May 12, 2023, the jury returned its verdict: guilty on every Idaho count. The murders of J.J. and Tylee. The conspiracy counts tied to J.J., Tylee, and Tammy Daybell. Grand theft for collecting J.J.'s Social Security after he was already dead. Larry and Kay Woodcock were in the courtroom that day. They had been the reason Idaho ever called Lori's townhome in the first place. They had spent 4 years carrying their grandson's name into rooms that did not want to hear it. In late July of 2023, Judge Boyce sentenced Lori Vallow Daybell to 3 consecutive terms of life without the possibility of parole, plus 10 years for the grand theft conviction. A year later, Chad Daybell's trial began before Judge Boyce in the same courthouse. In late May 2024, the jury found Chad Daybell guilty on all counts. The jury recommended death. Chad Daybell was transferred to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution. He is on Idaho's death row. 2 more cases were waiting in Arizona. In 2025, 2 separate juries convicted Lori Vallow Daybell of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the death of her ex-husband, Charles Vallow, and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the attempted shooting of Brandon Boo Drow. That July, the Maricopa County Superior Court added 2 more consecutive life sentences. At that Arizona sentencing, Kay Woodcock stood in the courtroom and read a victim impact statement. She read a letter she had written from J.J.'s point of view. The letter said, "I should be 13. I am forever 7. The sentences are real. The Idaho judgment is still being tested." In Idaho, Lori Daybell's appeal does not argue innocence. It argues the trial was structurally unfair, starting with the removal of her chosen lawyer. If the Idaho Supreme Court agrees, Lori Daybell could win a new trial. If it does not, the Idaho judgment stands. That lawyer was a man named Mark Means. In the state's response brief, prosecutors say Chad Daybell arranged and paid for Mark Means to represent Lori. In April of 2020, Mark Means publicly announced that he represented Chad Daybell. The same day, Lori called Chad from jail. Chad told her, in that recorded call, that Mark Means was his attorney too. At Lori's bail hearing, Means told the judge he represented both of them. In the state's view, this was an unwaivable conflict of interest. 2 named co-conspirators cannot share counsel. The court eventually agreed. Means was disqualified. While that fight was unfolding, Lori was twice found incompetent to stand trial. The proceedings stopped for a total of 353 days. By the time she regained competency, the lawyer she had chosen was gone, and the court had appointed someone else. That is the spine of her appeal. On October 4, 2023, appellate attorney Craig H. Durham filed an amended notice of appeal. On May 30, 2025, he filed an opening brief raising 5 issues. The 6th Amendment claim about Mark Means is the lead. The other 4 argue she was denied counsel at critical hearings, that the court acted while she was incompetent, that the trial improperly admitted the Arizona violence as prior bad acts, and that her right to a speedy trial was violated. In January of 2026, Deputy Attorney General Jeff Nye filed the state of Idaho's response. The state rejected all 5 claims. The state's answer to the Mark Means argument is the most direct. The state's brief says Chad Daybell arranged and paid for Mark Means to represent Lori. The state's brief says Chad told Lori during the recorded jail call that he had shared confidential information with Mark Means. The state's brief concludes that because Daybell and Vallow are named co-conspirators, they have interests adverse to one another. Lori's lawyer filed his reply brief on March 11, 2026 at 4:05 in the afternoon. As of mid-May 2026, the public Idaho case page does not show an oral argument date. Idaho prison records currently place Lori at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center, while Chad remains on Idaho's death row. 6 years ago, J.J. Vallow was 7 years old. Larry and Kay Woodcock had spent 9 months calling police, calling media, standing on courthouse steps. They learned what happened to him on June 9, 2020. 6 years ago, Tylee Ryan was 16. She had wanted to graduate from high school early. She had defended her mother with a baseball bat. Briefs can challenge rulings. They cannot change what investigators uncovered in that yard on June 9, 2020. I am Carson Morgan. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.